Welcome back, Honors. Welcome back to it. Welcome back to your flipped classroom and our continuing discussion of the rise of the Protestant Reformation. Right? So the big thing about it that you're going to realize is that I'm speaking a little bit lower because my wife's about to start a session and stuff like that. She needs to be able to focus. But also, the other big reason behind this whole thing is I'm just introing this because what I ended up doing is I got a little bit ahead of myself and I ended up basically flipping content for the other class and not realizing that I basically just went ahead and went a little too far forward, right? And that happens from time to time. But all you need to know is that if you are in my 5th period and you finished all this information in class already, you are good to go and you can go focus on actually looking up all the stuff for your artwork presentations that start tomorrow, all right? But if you are my 1st period, okay, you need to pick up right where this flip begins, wrap this whole thing up, focus on getting your artwork presentations ready, and we'll talk about more of this stuff tomorrow in class. Remember, we're going to be meeting in the presentation room tomorrow, so I'm excited to see y'all then. Y'all have a good one. At the stake, and they even forced him to wear a paper crown that looked like a pope one, and they mocked him whilst he died, which is insanity, if you ask me, all right? So going into it, though, you have to understand is that's what's going to end up happening in a lot of these early situations where these people are trying to reform the church, right? So now another big reformer that's going to come around is, ironically enough, not really as much of a reformer as much as he is as a critic. So, like, y'all know what critics are, right? When people come up and they show up and they're like, hey, this movie was good, or this book was bad, or blah, 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 blah. This guy, very much more a critic than anything, right? Well, first of all, let's talk about who he is. His name is Desiderius Erasmus. He is Flemish, which means he's kind of like a little bit French and a little bit like Dutch, all right? So he shows up though, but he's mostly Dutch. So now look, Desiderius Erasmus is considered the father of Christian humanism, right? And he's going to be your biggest push towards the Reformation out of the Renaissance, because he's going to take Christianity and humanism, that concept out of the Renaissance of like looking at the world around us and trying to figure out how to make things better, or try to answer common questions of like, why is the grass green? Why is life like this? Should the church be doing that? No, he's going to take humanism and apply it to Christianity. And the number one thing he realizes is that the church needs to fix itself, right? And so he actually begins to advocate for a lot of different perspectives, like including humanism with Christianity, because he thought that Christianity should be a guide to your life, not a checklist to get into heaven, right? And he believed that the Catholic Church had begun to wander way too far away from the ideals of the church and get more into this, did you do this sacrament, did you do this sacrament, did you do this sacrament, right? He even wrote an entire book about it called The Praise of Folly, where he lashed out against particularly the office of the Pope and a lot of the Catholic infrastructure at the time. He also was going to translate the Bible into Greek, which was considered a massive screw up, and you're not supposed to do that because you're not supposed to be like messing around with the Bible or translating it into vernacular languages, but he did it anyway. And then he also is going to expose Catholic Church corruption in his book known as The Praise of Folly. One of my favorite scenes or images from this entire book is literally where he actually put Julius II, right? Julius II outside of heaven, right? And he literally, in his book, The Praise of Folly, said that basically he thought that Julius II was so full of sin and so riddled by sin that he himself, when he died, was not going to be allowed into the kingdom of heaven. That instead he would be forced to stand out front of it, in front of St. Peter, and be barred from entering because of all the crimes that he committed against the faith, right? So this guy is literally saying that the Pope at the time is not even good enough to get into heaven because of all of the like corruption that he has dealt out, right? Now the thing about it though is he's technically not considered a reformer because he never left the Catholic faith. He died a Catholic and he stayed a Catholic for his entirety of his life, right? But the thing that we need to understand about him more than anything else, though, is he gets the ball rolling. And it's also really cooks down to a guy he knew, right? He actually knew this dude named Martin Luther, who we're going to really get into as we go a little bit further. Now, going into it, though, and the next thing we need to understand, though, is that you have to understand he's lashing out against people like Julius because popes led very wealthy lives. They supported the arts. They paid for certain things to happen inside their churches. For example, this right here is the interior of the entirety of the Sistine Chapel. The entire ceiling was done by Michelangelo to the tune of several $100,000. And then this back piece right there was the last major work by Michelangelo, known as The Last Judgment, which is one of my favorite pieces in existence, right? I actually think that it rivals the ceiling in complexity and value, but we'll talk about why when we get there. Now, where are they getting all this money, though? Where are like these popes receiving all these funds to actually make all this money? Because Pope Paul III is actually going to be the guy that patrons the back wall, known as the Last Judgment, while Julius II dies from syphilis after this, after the Sistine Chapel ceiling actually gets finished. But where are these popes getting all this money to actually do all this stuff? Well, the first and foremost thing is the tithe, right? And a lot of what this you need to understand is that as economics begin to churn back around in Europe, when we're coming coming out of the late Middle Ages and the tragedies that befell the late Middle Ages, including the Black Death Plague, the 100 Years War, and the famines of 1315 to 1317, when we see those things occur, yes, it did stagnate the economy a little bit, but then the economy is going to rapidly lurch forward into the 14 and 1500s. Now, with that, though, remember, the tithe, the donation to the church, the tax itself is a 10% margin of your income. Well, if the economy is skyrocketing, that means that that 10% is not going to increase in number, but it means the amount of that 10% is going to go up. Because if you made $100 last week, but then you made $200 next week, you're talking about literally you went from donating $10 to, $10 to $20, right? So you're seeing a lot more money going into the church because of the rising economics of Europe. The other big thing you have to understand is they're charging a lot of fees for stuff, right? They're charging a lot of fees for sacraments, which you're not supposed to be doing. But the big one is these things called indulgences. Now, what I need every single one of you to do right now is just highlight the word indulgence. Like, really highlight it. Like, highlight the ever-loving daylights out of it, right? It might be one of the more important words you've learned up to this point this entire year, right? Now, what an indulgence is something that you might have talked about in religion already, but let's really dive deep into it, okay? An indulgence is a lessening of time that the soul is supposed to spend in purgatory, right? Because according to Catholic ideology, there is this place between heaven and hell, known as purgatory, where you must sit in somber silence and punishment while you are waiting to get to heaven, right? And it's a very long time. Where an indulgence, though, is a lessening of time where you spend there, right? You do something, and you don't have to go to purgatory for as long. You get to go to heaven a little bit sooner. And the question you might want to ask yourself is like, Mr. Terry, did these exist in the Bible? Yes, they do, actually. Indulgences do exist in the Bible. They are actually outlined in the Bible several different times, but they're supposed to be good deeds, right? You have to understand that key concept right there. They're supposed to be good deeds, all right? Say it with me again. They are supposed to be good deeds. For example, if Victoria McCann or Madison felt, well, actually, no, I got a great way of looking at this, right? If Victoria McCann, right, came up to Mr. Terry and was like, hey, Mr. Terry, I think you're super nice. Can we have extra credit, right? I'd be like, no, that's not an indulgence. She's not doing it out of the kindness of her heart. But Madison the other day brought me a bunch of peanut butter M&Ms just because she felt nice, right? That's an indulgence, right? It's supposed to be a good thing that you do, all right? So the thing about it going into it, by the way, I appreciate those, even though my wife ate a bunch of them. All right, so like now going into it, though, you have to understand what the church is going to do, though, is they're going to start selling them, which is ironic. Because you're not supposed to, that's not a good thing to sell an indulgence, right? Now, let's talk about that really, really quickly. Why is that unfair, right? Why is it unfair to sell an indulgence to some people? Well, it's creating a hierarchy where you basically believe, or are representing yourself to believe, that you think that rich people are more entitled to get into heaven than poor people, right? Because it's basically saying that, hey, rich folks, go off, have a crazy weekend, commit some sins, right? Just come in and give a donation and you won't have to go to purgatory. Whereas the poor must live a very moral life and they're not allowed to violate or sin at all, right? That is extremely unfair. It's absolutely ridiculous, right? And also the way an indulgence worked is basically you would go up to a priest and you give a donation. They'd write on a piece of paper like, oh, here you go, a little bit less time. And they would just toss it to you, right? Which is so dumb and doesn't make any sense. But the thing about it, what we can see is that the church at the time, the hierarchy, the people within it, right? Not the faith, but the people within it were using their positions in the lives of the people to try and persuade them that, oh, you can have less time in purgatory. Well, that's shenanigans, all right? So now going to the next thing you need to understand is then you're going to see Martin Luther rise up, right? So something that you got to understand about Martin Luther before we even get to him, this is going to be the thing that pisses him off so bad that the Reformation begins, right? So Pope Leo X is going to be a really big, like, conveyor of these indulgences. He's going to be the biggest reason why the Reformation breaks out, right? So there's this guy named Pope Leo X, who is actually a Medici, right? He is from the Florentine family of the Medicis, and he is probably the best example of nepotism because literally he used his family's position, their bank, and their wealth to rise through the Catholic ranks to eventually become Pope. Well, what's going to end up happening is he's going to send this priest out into the Holy Roman Empire, and that priest is named Johann Tetzel. He was sent by Pope Leo to sell indulgences in what is now modern-day Germany. Germany didn't exist yet, but he was selling it to German-speaking people, and the money was going to be used to fix up St. Peter's, right? For any of y'all that have ever seen St. Peter's Basilica, which is now the Vatican central area is the Vatican Church, It is gorgeous, right? It is beautiful. It is ornate. Michelangelo designed the dome inside of it, which is absolutely ridiculous. And then also, fun fact, the Capitol building dome was designed off that dome as well. So going into it, though, they needed money to keep fixing up St. Peter's, right? So they decided that they're going to go out there and sell indulgences. But the indulgences that Johann Tetzel was going out to sell were like ultra premium, Ferrari level, Bugatti all out, holy crap, really expensive ones, right? Because they not only got you less time in purgatory, but they also got your mom or your dad or your brother or your sister or somebody that was already dead out of purgatory, right? So not only did it get you less time in purgatory, but your dead family members were getting less time in purgatory, right? And so literally there was this pamphlet that ran around the Holy Roman Empire. It's all in German and this is super pixelated, but all you need to know is the last 2 lines of it, right? Right here in German it says, "When a penny in the coffer rings, a soul from purgatory springs." What a coffer is it is a donation box, right? It is a little donation box, like right there, right? And basically what it's saying is that when you drop money into it and it makes a noise, a soul has just jumped out of purgatory, which is absolutely ridiculous, right? And this whole thing, or this campaign to sell these indulgences, is going to make this guy named Martin Luther so unbelievably angry that he is going to lash out against the entire process. Freak out, and he's going to start the Reformation, right? Because he is a young German priest that spoke out against this, but no one listened, all right? This guy has been to Rome multiple times, all right? This, like, dude is a very young man. He never intended on actually being a priest in the first place. He's going to be a lawyer, but then he, like, didn't die in a thunderstorm. So, like, the biggest thing about that ends up going down, though, is he had been lashing out against these for a while, but no one was listening. So finally, with the aid of the printing press, he wrote a very newfangled document. That document, I need you to highlight it right now, was known as the 95 Theses, right? The 95 Theses is going to be written by him, and it's 95 issues he has with the church. And then he nails them, quote unquote, to the door of the church in Wittenberg, Holy Roman Empire, which is now Wittenberg, Germany, right? Now, really, really quick fun fact, he never actually did that. Never actually nailed his, like, thesis to the door of that church, because that would be dumb. He's going to get in a lot of trouble. He's probably going to get arrested if he does that, right? The thing you have to understand, though, is he actually was a letter, right? But in this document that has 95 reasons why he's mad, over 40 times he says the word indulgence, right? So as you can tell, he's lashing out heavily because he believes the church has gone way too far, and he sends this bad boy out there. And Martin Luther's 95 Theses are very aggressive. They disapproved of indulgences. They criticized the power of the Pope. They called him to debate, not to create a new church, right? And like I said, we think it was just a letter. All right, so yeah, we think it was just a letter. He probably never actually nailed it to anything. But what ends up happening is people start printing it like crazy, and it starts going out in pamphlet form, okay? But what we're going to do right now, all right, is we're going to wrap it up right there, because I don't want to go any further into all this Martin Luther stuff until y'all really, really understand this stuff, right? And so we're going to take some time to review. And if you go ahead and drop down to the description below, you'll see the answers to your warm-up that are actually linked to a Google Doc, and you can make sure that your warm-up answers are right. And also, if you have any time left over, if you're watching this right now for homework, okay, that's one thing. But if you're watching this actually in the class that I missed because I'm at the golf tournament, really quickly, go ahead and keep working on your project research, looking some stuff up, find a note card. Remember, you get one note card front and back, but I'll see y'all soon. Y'all have a good one.